To get onto our list though will have to be our number 10, which is the creepy text message story. So this creepypasta is actually a website where you can click a button to reveal the next part of a conversation between two friends. The girl is called Annie96 and the guy is called McDavie. It all starts off pretty normal until Annie says she can hear noises coming from outside in the garden. When she looks outside, she sees a man digging in the dirt. Annie tells McDavie to quit messing around in the garden as she knows it's only him, but McDavie swears it's not. But Annie doesn't believe him, and next thing she knows, this man is in the house, calling out to her. Annie hides in the closet, frantically texting McDavie as the monster gets closer and closer and closer. But at the last second, the monster disappears, and it seems like a happy ending, with Annie inviting McDavie over the next day. But then McDavie says, "Wait, Annie, how do I know this is you?" And Annie96 goes offline. Mental. Talk about an emotional rollercoaster to kick us off here, guys. We're gonna jump right into number 9 now, which is a short but sweet creepypasta called The Man in the Snow. You are home alone and you hear on the news about the profile of a murderer who is on the loose. You look out the sliding glass doors to your backyard and you notice a man standing in the snow. He fits the profile of the murderer exactly and he is smiling at you. You gulp, picking up the phone to your right and dialing 911. You look back out the glass as you press the phone to your ear and notice he is much closer to you now. You then drop the phone in shock. There are no footprints in the snow. It's his reflection. Whoever said creepypastas had to be long to be scary was lying. Actually, I don't think anyone's ever said that anyway, but let's move right into number 8, which is called The Portraits. It's a tale of a hunter, alone in the woods as nighttime approaches. He tries to find his way out but gets lost, instead stumbling upon a small cabin. He found nobody inside and decided to rest there for the night and explain himself to the owner in the morning. As he looks around the house, he sees the walls are lined with portraits of faces, twisted, ugly, evil faces, and they're all staring at him. He turns his back, faces to the wall, and eventually falls asleep. The next morning he wakes up, blinking in the sunlight as he rises. He discovers that the cabins had no portraits on the wall, only windows. Ooh, okay, that was a good one, but let's move right on to number 7, which is an email chain called The Candle Cove. It starts off with a bunch of friends reminiscing about a TV show they used to watch as a kid called Candle Cove. They stitched their memories of the show together bit by bit. It was about a girl called Janice who would imagine herself as friends with pirates. Their ship was called the Laughingstock and one of their crew was Pirate Percy, who was scared of everything. It all comes flooding back as they piece their memories together, even the villains of the show, who were called Horace Horrible and the Skin Taker, a skeleton that wore a top hat and a cape made out of children's skin. Suddenly they begin to remember a horrible episode where the puppets were just screaming and screaming and screaming. The camera would cut from character to character as they let out a blood-curdling scream. Even the girl Janice was moaning and crying like she had been tortured for hours. The email ends with one of the guys saying he went to the nursing home that day to go and see his mother, and he asked her, "Do you remember if I watched a show called Candle Cove?" And she said she did. She said, "Because I used to think it was so strange that you said, 'I'm gonna go watch Candle Cove now, Mom,' and then you would tune the TV to static and just watch dead air for 30 minutes. You had a big imagination with your little pirate show." Nope. Okay, let's move on to number 6, and it's called Never Again. It's the tale of a 17-year-old girl with an abusive mother who lets a little girl into her house from a storm outside. The girl is emotionless, unaffected by the cold, and has big black eyes. She says her name is Lacey Morgan. The girl says Lucy can stay. She sets her up with a blanket in her home, but when she wakes up the next day, Lacey is gone. The girl switches on the news and sees that a little girl called Lacey Morgan was killed last night at 7 p.m. hours before the girl let her into her own home. The news says she was killed by her abusive mother, an abusive mother just like the girl has herself. That night the girl tries to get a normal night's sleep but is instead awoken by the touch of Lucy's hand, who whispers, "Never again." 10 minutes later there is a shriek from her abusive mother in the next room. She runs in to find Lucy on top of her, tearing flesh from her chest and throat. Lucy smiles before going for the jugular. The girl faints at the sight of it. Years later the girl is now free from her abusive mother, she's married and has her own daughter who she named Lucy. She ends the story with a chilling update from just the other day when she said she saw a little girl running barefoot through our neighbour's backyard up to their back door. It was around midnight, so I couldn't be sure, but I thought she met my eyes with her black ones, and I could swear she mouthed 2 words at me. Never again. Okay, we're halfway through our top 10 creepypastas in at number 5 with lightning. The story begins with a man and his son moving into their new home on the night of a huge storm. The little boy is excited by all the lightning and talks about it all the next day. He does it again a few nights later and the night after that. Every morning he wakes up and tells his dad about the lightning, but the father tells him there were no more storms and thinks it's just a reoccurring dream from the first night. Then one morning he's reading the paper and the horror hits him like a truck. There's a story about a sexual predator who had been arrested for taking pictures of little boys through their windows as they slept, with flash photography. But it gets worse. The next day the boy runs up to the dad and says, Dad, there's no more lightning at my window anymore. The dad says, oh, it died down, did it? And the boy replies, no, it's just in my closet. I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to go anywhere near that closet. I want to move on to number 4, which is called The Girl in the Photograph. One day a boy was at school when he found a picture on the grass outside of the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. She had a dress with tights on and red shoes, and her hand was holding up a peace sign. The boy thought she was so beautiful that he decided he had to find her. He asked everyone in the school and even his own family, but nobody recognized her. Defeated, he went to bed that night with the picture next to his bed, but was awoken by a tapping and giggling from the window. But by the time he got there, it was gone. He had no luck finding answers the next day, but was awoken again that night by a tapping and giggling at the window. He followed the sound outside this time, across the road, where bam, he was hit and killed by a car instantly. The driver jumped up and ran to the boy and found the picture in his hand. He saw a girl wearing a dress with tights on and red shoes and holding up 3 fingers. Alright guys, we've reached our last few creepypastas here with number 3, and it's called The Affair. It tells the story of a man named Jeremy who divorced his wife Gail when he finds out she's been having an affair. All he knows about Gail's new lover is that he's called Chamberlain. As they separate, he notices that Gail has more and more bruises on her each day, but decides to keep his distance as their relationship is already over. Then one day, Gail disappears, no note or text, and Jeremy thinks, well, if I haven't heard from her in 24 hours, I'll let the police know. The next day, he's on his way to work when he gets pulled over by a police car behind him. The officer says he pulled Jeremy over because he noticed his trunk had popped open and asked him to come and look. As they go to the back of the car, they open the trunk to find the lifeless body of Gail in the fetal position. The officer immediately cuffs Jeremy, pins him to the police car, and calls for backup on his radio. He says, "This is Officer Chamberlain requesting backup and an ambulance." Oh snap. That was a good one, but let's move right on to our number 2, which is simply called The Story. It's a tale of a man who books a room into a hotel with just one condition: don't look in one room that is out of bounds, it's off limits completely. He agrees and walks to his room, but on the way he sees the forbidden room and his curiosity gets the better of him. He tried to enter, but the door was locked, so he took a peek through the keyhole. He saw a normal room with a woman in the corner whose skin was completely white. She had her back to the door. Shocked, the man went to his room for the night. The next day, he decided to take another look through the keyhole as he passed the forbidden room, but this time, all he saw was red, a deep, thick, unmoving red. He told the woman at the front desk, who didn't look too surprised. She said, "You looked through the keyhole, didn't you?" And he nodded. She continued, "Well, I might as well tell you the story. A long time ago, a man murdered his wife in that room and her ghost haunts it. But these people were not ordinary. They were white all over, except for their eyes. Their eyes were a deep, deep red." Whoa, okay guys, alright, so far in our creepypasta we've seen monsters, we've seen murderers, we've seen molesters. But for us, none of them can touch the king of all creepypasta. It's the smiling man in at number 1. One day, a guy was walking alone at night when he first noticed him. On the far end of the street was a silhouette of a man, dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, and he was slowly coming closer. The guy tried to move around him, and as he did, he noticed the man was not only dancing, he was smiling at the sky, his eyes open and wild. By this point, the guy was freaked out and crossed the road, but when he looked back, he saw the smiling man was crouched on the floor behind him. The smiling man rose slowly and continued his dance towards the guy, eyes to the sky and smiling even bigger. The guy confronts him, saying, "What do you want?" But the smiling man just turned and danced away slowly. The guy walks on before turning to check on the smiling man, but now he was running full speed towards him, and he ran too. He ran as far and as fast as he could all the way home without looking behind him once. But he did end up with possibly the most scary creepypasta of all time. Alright, let's get into it. Starting off number 10 now, we have Jeff the Killer. This is one that somehow I didn't include in the first part. I'm sorry, I don't know how I missed it out. Looking back at it, I thought I'd start off with it this time to make up for it though. This is the famous story of Jeff, a normal boy living a normal life until the age of 13. His family moved him to a new area against the wishes of he and his brother Leo. They were attacked by bullies, and when Jeff fought back, he hurt them so badly that the police tried to take him away. The depression and rage he felt after this encounter shows how Jeff went from a normal boy to a twisted psychopath. The next time he met the bullies, there were guns, smashed bottles, knives, and bleach. Jeff was victorious, but now he had a hideous appearance to go with his twisted personality. That was only the beginning though. Jeff carved a Glasgow smile into his own cheeks before butchering his own parents, then turning the knife on his brother. The story is a fairly long read and there's been a lot of spin-off stories from it, but it's also become a rite of passage for any creepypasta fans. Next up at number 9 now we have Eyeless Jack. This is Eyeless Jack, a terrifying being with no mouth or nose and eye sockets blacker than the void itself. He makes up for his lack of features though by stealing other people's. Eyeless Jack arrives through your bedroom window in the middle of the night. Black slime oozes from every orifice on his body. And here he gets meticulous. He will cut his victims open but will only ever take one thing. If however the victims begin to rouse, Eyeless Jack becomes enraged and violent. He will hack and slash, mutilating victims to death. The original creepypasta draws people in as an eye-widening piece of internet horror, and the spin-off stories keep people coming back for more. Moving on to number 8 now, we have Tiki Toby. This is a famous creepypasta that a lot of you guys recommended. The story revolves around a boy called Toby who suffered from mental disorders as a child. It talks of him being bullied and also being homeschooled. He was abused by his father, and when he turned 17, his sister was killed in a car crash. This sent him over the edge mentally, and one night, returning from hospital, Toby saw the Slender Man, a man who needs no introduction. Slender Man stalked Toby for weeks, causing many visual and auditory hallucinations. His mother brought him to a psychiatrist, but to no avail. He dreamed of his sister's corpse, followed by an attack by the Slender Man. The voice in his head told him to kill his father, and one day those voices got the upper hand. Toby stabbed his father in front of his mother. In a desperate attempt to escape the police, he set the whole neighborhood on fire, but was soon surrounded by the flames. Just before he was consumed, Slender Man appeared in front of him and saved him. 2 weeks later, Toby's mother heard that her son was the main suspect in the murder of several teenagers. From this day on, Toby was a proxy of Slender Man. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Ben Drowned. This was another creepypasta that many of you guys said I should have included in the first part. I went and found it, and wow. It's a long one. Essentially, it's a story written by Alex Hall, who's also known as Jaducible. It revolves around an old Majora's Mask cartridge that is haunted by the spirit of a boy named Ben. In life, he was sacrificed by the Moon Children cult. His father was the one to drown him. The cartridge, with his spirit in, was passed from person to person until landing in the hands of the storyteller. He says that the game glitched in weird places, characters spoke strangely, and the music sometimes played backwards. The story goes on to explain the influence of the cult, what really happened to Ben, and maybe why you shouldn't trust a storyteller at all. Next up at number 6 now, we have Clockwork. Her real name was Natalie Ouellette. She was once a normal girl, nothing out of the ordinary, either good or bad. However, when she was young, very young, the story was that Natalie was abused by her own family. The abuse mainly came in verbal and physical forms, although the details are quite hazy. During it all, Natalie is unable to tell anyone of the pain that she is going through. Eventually, she comes to believe that time itself, the very concept of time, is somehow against her, and not only that, that time led to her abuse. The story follows her through her tortured childhood, her battle against time, and the disturbing loss of her sanity. Moving on to number 5 now, we have Sally. That's the name of the story and also of the main character, a 12-year-old girl who had been sexually abused by her own uncle and threatened into silence. Eventually she caved in and told her parents something was wrong. They just dismissed it as a nightmare though and sent her away. Sally was left with her mouth still hanging open, the words of her abuse not able to reach her lips. She wasn't able to go into the details of the horrors her uncle inflicted upon her. Even worse though, her uncle heard her trying to tell her parents what happened and decided to take revenge. Tricked Sally's parents into letting him take her to the store, despite Sally not wanting to. Instead, he drove her to a park and killed her by smashing in the side of her head with a rock after beating her up. The creepypasta details her story in much more gory, drawn out detail, and even goes on to explain how Sally now haunts her old house, terrifying adults in the neighborhood while playing with the children there in peace, at least for now. Coming at number 4 now, we have the Bloody Painter. His real name was Helen Otis. One day at school, Helen decided to not help a girl named Judy who had lost her watch. A boy called Ben pointed out something in Helen's bag. Ben took it out and saw that it was the watch. Judy flipped out, blaming Helen that he stole the watch. Helen tried to tell her that he didn't do it, but no one believed him. One day, Ben came back and this time he took his notebook and tore up his drawings. That upset Helen. He couldn't hold it in anymore, and so he punched him. In return, Helen was beaten badly. A few months later, he got a Facebook message from a stranger. It was a boy called Tom who had also been bullied. The pair bonded over this. A couple of days later, Tom asked Helen to meet him on the school rooftop. Helen agreed and went to the school rooftop the next day. When he got there, Tom told him that he framed Helen with Judy's watch. They both fought and Tom fell off the roof. Helen tried to save him, but he didn't have the strength to save him. This made his bullying worse because people said that he killed Tom, or at least didn't save him. Later that night, Helen lost it. He believed that Tom deserved to die and believed that others deserved to die as well. He killed everyone who bullied him under the name The Bloody Painter. Next up at number 3 now, we have Anora Petrova. This is a scary creepypasta that fits well into our modern age. It's the story of a woman who was on track to become a promising figure skater in the US. Everything was going great until she discovered an evil, sentient Wikipedia page about her own life. It somehow detailed her death and the deaths of her family. It drove her to insanity. Anora tried to edit the page. She tried desperately to change her own fate, but her life spiraled out of control in the most horrific ways. The harrowing tale is told from the point of view of Anora as she continues on the descent into madness. Perhaps the creepiest part of the whole thing is that the Wikipedia page stops talking about her fairly on and instead starts addressing the reader. That's you. It instills a fear in people that it could happen to anyone, and it's a reminder that with the growth of the internet in this new age of information, there are many corners for evil to hide. Next up now guys, at the number 2 spot we have Judge Angel. Originally she was called Diana. Ever since she was born, her father never loved her. She looked nothing like her parents, and all her family ever seemed to notice were her eyes. Those deep, black, soulless eyes. Eventually her father even left the household, unable to be around her. When she was 15, Diana was beaten by her father for wanting to go outside. Diana was not allowed to. When her mother tried to comfort her, her father turned on her too. One night Diana and her mother decided to run away on Christmas Eve that year. When the mother told the father this plan, he flew into a rage and beat her to death. Diana then picked up a sword from her father's study. After a final confrontation, she slew him on the spot, pronouncing him guilty. She burned the house. She was seen by witnesses for the last time standing outside of the burning home, and people swore she had wings. And finally, number 1 now, we have Nurse Anne. This story tells of Anne Lucen Mia. She was once a normal, hard-working nurse who unfortunately could never seem to get things right. Try as she might, there were always terrible mistakes when treating her patients. One day though, a serial killer caught her at work. When she entered the room, the killer jumped her and started cutting her up into pieces. One of the other nurses found her dead. They took her to a specialist hospital, and unbelievably, they were able to stitch Nurse Anne back together again. A disembodied voice helped her track down her killer and enact her revenge upon him. After she started killing though, she just couldn't stop. As time went by, her killing only increased. In the end, other creepypasta characters took an interest in her. To see her involvement with the other characters and the full extent of the grisly deeds, you'll have to read the full story of Nurse Anne. Starting off at number 10 now, we have The Visiting. This one was written by Tales from the Abyss in 2016. In its short history, it's turned heads as a terrifying story about the dark web. It revolves around an 18-year-old guy and girl. She convinces him that they should check out the dark web, just for fun. While browsing around, they find a movie called The Visiting. They were drawn in by the display picture, a simple white background with the title written in black Arial font. When he wasn't looking, the girl actually ordered the movie to be delivered to her house. He was pretty mad about that. He didn't want anything from the dark web coming to her home, or any connection that they had even been there at all. 3 days later, they were watching a horror movie at her house when they heard an aggressive knock at the door. They opened it to find a tall, stocky man with a ski mask and dark clothes was stood outside, and he was holding a hammer. He was about to slam the door and call the police when he heard his girlfriend scream from the back of the house. When he ran there, she was pointing in the garden. An identical man was at the window holding a baseball bat. The story only gets more horrifying from there, and is a reminder that you should only order a visitor if you really want one. Next up at number 9 now, we have The Journey to the Dark Web. This story from 2015 is written from the perspective of a computer technician. One day he gets a call out to a business who are complaining that their internet is acting up. When he arrives, he sets about trying to fix their connection. It's something he's done a million times before, and in his boredom he noticed a strange network pop up on his computer. He joined it out of curiosity and began began poking around to try and find where it came from. Then his PC froze up for a few seconds. How strange, it never did that. After messing around a little bit more, it kept happening. He decided he had had enough, so he tried to disconnect, but the network hadn't finished with him just yet. Just as he was about to hit the power button on his laptop to perform a hard reset, his browser opened again. This time a little chat box opened. It simply said, "Hello." He stared at the screen for a few seconds, not quite sure what to do. A journey then began which he could never forget, one that blurred the lines between human, AI, and a whole new kind of demon. Moving on to number 8 now, we have The Connection. In September 2018, this story was posted to a creepypasta website titled "I found a laptop connected to the deep web." From there, you're just hooked really. The main character finds a bag that someone must have left in his local cafe. He thought about giving it back, handing it in to the staff, but a moment of dishonesty came over him and he decided to take the bag home. It was a decision he would live to regret. When he gets home, he isn't sure what to expect and is shocked to find a laptop in mint condition inside. There was even a charger and a wireless mouse. He also found a phone that had no text and only one recent call to an out-of-state number. The more he examined the phone and the laptop, the creepier things got. He found pictures of a local barbershop, a path in the woods, a garage, and even the cafe where he found the laptop. Soon he noticed that a spate of recent murders were all tied to these locations, all except the cafe. And then he begins to make a horrible realization. Coming in at number 7 now, we have The Freak Show. This one was told by Reddit user Jaden Sutton. He says he grew up loving technology and by university he considered himself a hacker. Eventually he got bored of this and he wanted a new thrill. His friend told him about the dark web, and the very same day he was scrolling through some pages, suddenly he got a pop-up box. A message in red text read, "If you don't know what's next, you're probably in the wrong place." There were 2 buttons, continue and leave. He clicked continue. He said that was the biggest mistake of his life. A black screen appeared with a blood red title at the top of the screen. It simply read The Freak Show. In the middle of the screen there was a chat box. A message popped up from someone titled admin. It said, "Hello." The conversation that followed is one that disturbed him for life and is said to have a similar effect on many people that read it. Moving on to number 6, we have Few Are Many. This is a great one about some kids who get curious about the dark web and how it's not separate from their own lives, it's very much intertwined with it. After installing a browser to visit the dark web, the main character goes to a video site, not unlike a dark web version of YouTube. There was soon one that caught their eye. It was a video from their local burger joint called Dark Point Burgers. They end up seeing people they know, places they know, strange twisted images that scare them into turning off the computer, but it won't. Then they see a live video feed from the room they are in. Then a voice speaks and their life changes forever. Next up at number 5 now, we have Dark Afternoon Tape. Now this story revolves around the storyteller's friend finding a dark website that showcases banned content from the regular web. Gruesome crime scene photos and that sort of stuff. The friend finds an audio clip and starts listening with headphones. The more he listens, the more distressed he looks. Suddenly he stands up. He takes off the headphones and throws them on the desk. He was shaking and he simply said, "That audio file." So now the storyteller wanted to hear it for himself. Before he could get there though, the friend deleted the sound file and shut down the computer. He soon left, but the storyteller remembered something. The audio file had come with a story, a real story and a text file, a story that was scarier than whatever his friend had heard on that audio file. What follows next is the text from the story. It's titled "The Dark Afternoon Incident, Real or Hoax." Here's the first paragraph for you guys, but you'll have to find the rest for yourself. "As a journalist, I've investigated everything from political corruption to celebrity scandals to international cybercrime, but never have I come across something so bizarre and deeply disturbing as a simple audio tape." Moving on to number 4 now, we have Taking Care. This one was posted to Reddit by Packathon John. He tells a story of how he was always fascinated by the deep web. One day at college, his friend set everything up for him to use it. After a few weeks, he felt like a pro. He started to get a little bit cocky. He turned off the censored mode and began to go deeper. Most of the pages led to just dead web pages, but eventually he stumbled across a site called All the Gore. It was a big chat room with many different topics. Even though he had a pretty strong stomach from some of the horrific stuff he'd seen on the normal internet, this was something else. After a little while, he realized just how sick this site really was. The people in the chat rooms were actual killers, bragging about some of the things that they had done. He told them they were sick and he threatened to call the police on them. They told him he would regret it if he did. He reached for the phone to make the call. There was a new message. He opened it and it said, "Call the police and you're dead." Now that's a line that some creepypastas would be happy to end on, but that story only starts there. Moving on to number 3 now guys, we have Welcome to Iris. This is a story about a guy called Ben who lost his laptop at a cafe. Hopefully not the same cafe that I mentioned in an earlier story. He returned and asked the owner if they had a lost and found, and within 3 seconds he had the laptop back in his possession. The owner said an old guy had returned it after finding it under the chair where Ben usually sat. Now Ben didn't think much of it and was just happy to get his laptop back. When he booted it up at home though, he was surprised to find that all the icons on his desktop had been wiped clear, all except one in the very center. It was called Tor, T-O-R. Some of you guys may recognize that as an access program for the deep web. He found himself in a chat room and after a while he decided to close the screen and just delete the browser. Then a message appeared in the chat room. It said 495-24953 wants to chat. Ben dismissed it as just a bot. Then it said, "Hello Ben." Chills crawled down his spine at the sight of his own name. Okay, just a clever bot, he thought. He hovered over the X again when another message came through. This time it was a jumbled code. When he finally decoded it, it was a letter addressed to him, inviting him to join a group called Iris. You guys should go and find a story for yourselves to see his struggles with Iris and the horror of having to join a group that you don't want to because they know your name and they know where you live. Next up at number 2 now we have Why I Left the Deep Web. This is a creepypasta posted to the No Sleep subreddit by Tas Diablo. Now I say creepypasta, but that's not what the disclaimer says at the top of the story. It reads, "Disclaimer, this is not a ghost story or creepypasta that most of you are here to read. Please do not read this if you are easily disturbed." The story is told by a 22-year-old postgraduate who said that he started exploring the dark web at high school. He had 3 aliases on it. He ordered drugs and got a drug dealer to sell them in real life. He was mastering the dark web. Then in his second year, the government began shutting down sites like the Silk Road and Mad Onion. He went deeper though. After 10 years, he thought he had seen everything there was to see. Then, one day, he and his friend were in a chat room when people mentioned a site that no one had managed to get past its encryption except for one person. They shared what they saw in that chat room, and the storyteller describes it as this. "This site is the most cancerous and revolting section from the darkest part of the dark web. It is a scar that I bear to this day, and it is one that I will never ever forget. I'll warn readers again, this is not for the faint-hearted, and something that even the most emotionally numb people will not be able to deal with." The story continues from there and it only gets darker. And finally, number 1 now, we have The Contract. This is a creepypasta by Shannon Higdon about a guy called Martin Croker who worked for a newspaper. Now his boss, Teddy Wilson, wanted him to do a piece all about the dark web. He gets paired up with his colleague Susan. The pair are guided on their journey with a dark web regular called Hector. He tells them about The Contract, a shady agreement there in which people give their lives over to a dark organization when they become truly desperate in life. It's also known as the Devil's Contract, or quite simply the final contract. Even on the dark web, its existence is more like an urban legend. The victims sign away their lives in this digital contract, and at that very moment their life no longer belongs to them. In the character's quest for the story of the century, they try to discover the roots of this contract, what it contains, and just how powerful the people are behind it.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Alice killings. I've talked about this creepypasta before, but basically it's a famous Japanese urban legend about a mysterious serial slayer. They would go around murdering random individuals. At the scene of their gruesome crime, they would leave a single playing card by the body with the name Alice written on it in the victim's blood. The killer ended up taking the lives of 5 individuals. Well, in 2003, there was a serial killer in Spain that would also leave playing cards by their victims, just like the Alice killer. He ended up slaying 6 individuals before the police caught him. him. Coming in at number 9, we have the Facebook messages. So the creepypasta I'm going to be talking about is the one titled "My Dead Girlfriend Keeps Messaging Me on Facebook," and it's pretty self-explanatory what happens. A guy's girlfriend passes away but keeps messaging him on Facebook saying random things, almost as if she's like toying with him from the dead. Well, in 2016, Kayla Brown and her boyfriend Charlie Carver were kidnapped by a serial killer. Charlie was killed, but Kayla was kept alive in a shipping container for 2 months. To avoid suspicion, the killer went on both of their Facebooks and sent messages and status updates to not worry friends and family. He said that they were fine and left on their own, but eventually he was caught and Kayla was rescued. Moving on to number 8, we have the Axeman of New Orleans. Legend goes that in the early 20th century, French photographer and inventor Edouard Martel was traveling the United States taking thousands of photos of the places he visited. He typically would hide his camera and set it to go off automatically. That way he could capture real life without people knowing. However, after reviewing his photos, he realized that he captured a brutal serial killer who police could never catch. He was named the Axeman of New Orleans, or New Orleans. You guys make fun of how I say that name. And now parts to this story are true. Parts are false. For starters, Edouard Alfred Martel is a real person, but he wasn't a photographer. Second, the Axeman of New Orleans was a real killer. During an 18-month spree from 1918 to 1919, he killed 6 individuals. So this creepypasta was based off of a real killer. In our 7th spot, we have the Green Man. Now, there are a bunch of different versions to the story, but they are all about a green man with no face that stalks the streets of Pennsylvania at night. Some say he was splashed with acid. Others say he was struck by lightning. Whatever happened to him, it turned his skin green and melted his face. They called him Charlie No Face, or the Green Man. As scary as it sounds, this story is completely true, but it's a really sad one. So Charlie No Face was indeed a real person. His name was Raymond Robinson. When he was a child, he was badly injured by an electrical accident that caused his face to appear disfigured. As a result, he was fearful of going out during the day, so at night, that's when he would go out and he would go for walks. He was completely harmless, but people who encountered him would be immediately frightened by his appearance. Making our way down the list at number 6, we have Capgras Delusion. The creepypasta Capgras Delusion is about a woman named Harriet Starling Malcolm. She ends up developing Capgras Delusion as a result of a brain aneurysm and starts to believe her younger brother is an imposter. He's been replaced by someone that looks like him, but it isn't him. When Harriet passes away, her husband develops this disorder as well and ends up killing the brother. Capgras Delusion is a real psychological condition. Those that suffer from it believe that people around them have been replaced by exact copies. Those with dementia or schizophrenia may also suffer from this delusion. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Barbie AVI. Barbie AVI is a pretty famous urban legend. It surrounds someone finding a mysterious video titled Barbie AVI. The video is very fuzzy and the sound is distorted, but it features a blonde woman getting interviewed. In the urban legend, the narrator recognizes where the video was filmed and ends up going to the place. They end up in an old abandoned building where they hear weird moans and whimpers coming from a room. They flee in a panic. Now, the backstory to this video is not real, but the creepy video itself certainly is. Over the years, a lot of people tried to figure out what the video was about. At one point in the video, the girl raises her arm and it's revealed that it's completely amputated. Some people think that the video was about BIID, body integrity identity disorder, and that the woman cut off her arm because she didn't find it to be beautiful. Eventually, it was revealed that her name is Tammy. When she was younger, she was washing clothes with an old school washing machine with no safety features. While the machine was operating, she stuck her arm in to push a sheet in more, and it ended up trapping her arm and twisting it until it ripped off. The video we see is when she's older and is trying to get a job at a modeling company, and it's her interview. In our 4th spot, we have the Russian sleep experiment, another very famous creepypasta, and boy is it creepy alright. The creepypasta is quite a lengthy read, but basically story goes that in the 1940s, Russian researchers were conducting unethical tests deaths on enemy prisoners. They captured 5 enemies that they planned to keep awake for 30 days using a gas-based stimulant. They wanted to see the effects that sleep deprivation had on the brain. And in the end, everything goes wrong. They spiral into madness and then they all die in gruesome ways. Now, I hope this exact story isn't true, but it's quite possible that it was based on the number of real-world examples of governments experimenting on humans, like Project MKUltra, where CIA agents were injecting people with LSD, or Project Sleepless Soldiers, where Soviet soldiers were given a drug that let them fight for days without needing sleep. Moving on to number 3, we have Laughing Jack. Laughing Jack is a legend about a clown-type creature that likes to befriend children and then get them to commit dark deeds, or he even will harm them. He usually slices them open and replaces their organs with candy. Well, in 2015, a 12-year-old girl stabbed and killed her stepmom after Laughing Jack told her to do so. The girl claimed that she heard voices months before the stabbing occurred. She even begged her father for help, but Laughing Jack got to her. These creepypastas may not be real, but this just shows how real their influence is. Coming in at number 2, we have Slender Man. This dude went from being a Photoshop photo to a creepypasta and then a film star. His influence is huge, and I'm sure all of you know all about Mr. Slendy. Clearly, he's fake, but his influence is so real. In 2014, an Ohio woman was stabbed several times by her 13-year-old daughter, who claimed that Slender Man told her to do it. The woman claimed that she came home one night from work to her daughter standing in the kitchen wearing a white mask. She had her hood up and her hands were covered by her sleeves. She then was attacked by her own daughter. She had cuts on her neck and face and was stabbed in the back. All because of Slender Man. And in the number 1 spot, we have Walking Sam. Walking Sam is said to be a shadow demon that convinces people to commit suicide. It's said to live in the woods at the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. It appears as a thin, tall creature wearing a black top hat. It wears the souls of its victims dangling down from its arms. Here's the thing. In 2015, there was a huge amount of suicides in the area where Walking Sam is said to live. From 2014 to 2015, there was 103 suicides. Some say the number could be higher. One local said that there was more than 200 suicides in only 3 months. That's incredibly freaky. Maybe Walking Sam is real.